podcast. We are here with your hosts, Dave Reed, Ryan Wilkinson, and Joey Gallo.
We are back. It's been forever, boys. What's going on?
It's a whole new year.
We are ready to get into off-season mode. Not sure what that's going to look like, but we're ready for it.
I know, man. That's right. We the regular season has come to a finish for the NFL, and that means that your fantasy titles should have been decided. How did you guys do in all of your leagues outside of obviously our league of record here?
Yeah, I didn't make the finals in any, so it was not a great playoff fantasy season for me.
Yeah, best finish in mine was 4th. And yeah, so not the best season I've ever had, but I've got good draft capital going into next year, so that's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, I won one, which was good just for the bank account to get some of that in the box. It was a brand new league, and this one commissioner has like 30 leagues in it. But other than that, it was just brutal. I feel like a lot of my teams that made the playoffs just had quick exits, and I just limped into them all. So whatever. I'm ready to turn the page and get into off. This is the most fun part of Dynasty, I think, that we're about to get into. But also, boys, I don't know if you realize, episode 20, it's big. Starting the new year off with a milestone episode.
Big milestone.
Big. We talk about the 20th episode. This is the make or break one. We made it.
We're still going. We're going to have to do something major for like episode 50.
Oh, man. Sparklers and everything.
I'll tell you what, I think fantasy content is more enjoyable in the off season than it is during the season itself. So a lot of opportunity for us to provide some good value.
For sure. And also for me, it's less stressful because like we have to, I mean, think about everyone when you're in your leagues and you had a brutal loss. And you don't really want to talk about fantasy or even look about it. And we typically are coming back in here and doing the pod and looking at it and opening those wounds again, over and over again. So in the offseason, no wounds. It's going to be great. I can't wait. It's all upside.
I mean, we all just admitted we didn't make the finals except Dave in one league.
It's
so
okay.
A lot of pain we had.
I know. And let's say that was probably a combined, 30-plus leagues, and we got one win, but we're doing it.
People are going to stop listening to us. We got to do better next year.
I swear we're good experts here. All right. With that, I want to give a quick update and shout out to our league and how that finished. Our title champion, it was Schluter, who took it home over the Rosinski brothers. And for third place as well, McCaffrey and Mike Williams took me out. As, again, we talked about the wounds just hurt over and over again. And it does think because Schluter beat me with 3 minutes left on Monday Night Football. And if I had won that, Matt's team did nothing in the title. I don't know, would have won the championship. Instead, I hit a juggernaut in Caffrey-Williams combo. So that hurt, but also in the consolation bracket, Canelo's beat Clark Sauce to get that $50 prize. So that was pretty fun to see. Ryan, want to give a quick update on the dud draft as well? We have results there.
Yeah, I did win the dud draft. I think it was kind of anchored by my J.K. Dobbins pick, who went down early and secured me pretty much a zero for the rest of the season. But Dave, you had a nice little comeback, came in second.
That's right. We're very good at picking bad players here.
Yeah. So kind of the opposite of how our fantasy seasons went. We did well in the dud draft.
Yes.
But yeah, so that was fun. We'll have to do that again next year.
Yeah, and one last update too were some interleague bets. It was just me and DaCosta who get into it in the preseason. One was it was his Greg D versus my Chig, and Chig won because Greg D got 5.5 points. I think he played the first game, got hurt, came back, played a play, got hurt again, and didn't play again. So I won that one easily. And then the second one was my Trevor Lawrence versus his Geno Smith. And Trevor Lawrence did come out on top of it. I think both players disappointed on the season as a whole. I think there's reasons for that for Trevor, but obviously he definitely had higher hopes. But he at least won me this bet, which was $50. And Dan is going to get dosed with water twice, hopefully this weekend. So we will see. But yeah, that was the wrap up of our league. Any other thoughts on our league this year before we start getting into the NFL, recap? All right. Well,
No, fun first year, and congratulations to Schluter.
I know. Yeah, I know. And he's a new father too. So
Nice.
he gets to wear the belt around his kid. So that's pretty exciting.
Maybe hit them with it.
Yeah, right. But moving on, as I mentioned, the NFL regular season has come to a finish, and it was there's a lot of interesting storylines throughout the season. A couple ones fantasy related. Just want to get out of the way quick, but like Christian McCaffrey, he had a godlike season. These are the seasons where if you have him, there's a good chance you made it to the finals. Didn't happen across the board, but he was definitely one of the most owned players on our. I think it was the second most owned player on championship teams. And just for us in our league, he would have been the QB7. So as a running back, so just think about that. A lot of us were looking to find a secondary quarterback, and you could have just owned Christian McCaffrey, and it would have been better. Puka Nacua, the rookie sensation, in week 18, he broke the rookie record for both receptions and yards. I think receptions was Waddle a couple years ago. Yards was someone, I don't even know the guy's name, and it was like 1940 or something like that. But he did it both this year. Just an absolutely insane season. But those are two of the major highlights to close the year. But what were some that stood out to you guys?
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think in regards to McCaffrey, right? So do you view him more as a keep or a sell at this point? He's 27. He's been in the league for, I think this was his 7th or 8th year. He's in a great offense that obviously isn't going anywhere, and maybe he's got another couple years left, but we've seen guys kind of fall off the cliff, right? Like I have Kelsey in a Dynasty league, and his value like very, very, very quickly took a nosedive this year. And I kind of wish that I had traded him in the last offseason, right? So if you have McCaffrey right now, are you just going to hold on, or are you looking to sell? Like if I had McCaffrey after what happened with Kelsey this year, I would firmly be in the sell camp. But I'm curious if you guys would agree.
I think I would hold for another year. So he missed pretty much the entire seasons of 2020 and 2021. So like maybe he's not as gassed as he could be at this point in his career. But I think, it literally his worst finish was RB15 except for week 17, which is just insane. So it's kind of like a cheat code if you have him on your team, if he puts that up again next year. So I probably would hold to see what he does again next year, but there definitely is a little risk there that he's getting older and been in the league for a while now.
Yeah, I'm always willing to sell anyone, if anyone knows me in fantasy. So I would not be saying no to anything. I just would need an insane offer for it, which I would definitely float out, see like if there's someone in there. But honestly, if you have McCaffrey, you are most likely a contending team, and it's hard to like sell him out if you're still going to be potentially contending going forward. And I don't view McCaffrey as having the early or the same age cliff as your prototypical running back, because he's not exactly built like a prototypical running back. He's more like a blend of a wide receiver running back. And yeah, he doesn't have as much mileage on him because of the other injuries he's had. He's also a freak. Like there's just certain players that are just built differently and last longer. I mean, even like obviously I'm not going to use all, but like Frank Gore went forever. I don't think he's like a Frank Gore, a completely different body type. Zeke showed juice this year later in his career as well, but like McCaffrey didn't show any signs of slowing down. Like these other guys, you started seeing some wear and tear. McCaffrey got better. Like this was one of his best seasons. So I think he's still, even though 27 is when you start getting worried, I think he'll be fine through 30. I don't think his 30 is going to be like a great year, but I don't think he's going to drop off for another year or two personally. So, but with that being said, if someone's willing to offer you something big and you get like, if someone gave you like a Brees plus something like that, I would probably do, because I'm like Brees, I don't think could hit the complete upside McCaffrey could, because McCaffrey's like another level, but that you're still getting like an unbelievable asset and then other top of it. So that'd be something I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I would take Brees plus a high pick, right? If someone offered me like Brees and a first right now for next year's draft for McCaffrey, I think I would take it.
Yeah,
it's just crazy how fast the cliff comes for running backs. Like Eckler's cliff came like midway through this season, like after week 1. It was almost like week 1 he was good, and then hit the cliff right after week 1, and that was it.
But Eckler was a player you were worried about that happening at some point with him. Just he's a smaller body, but it's true. These guys, it hits them.
Like there's no warning,
over.
right? Like you either have to like
you're
go for
caught
it,
holding the bag,
or you're just riding it forever.
Yeah. Another player I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, and I know Joe, I was talking to you pre-hitting play on this pod, but is Josh Allen. And I love Josh Allen if I have him. I'm very excited still. But just that, how do you guys feel about him? Because personally, like I feel weird on how he finished. He finished the QB1 by a decent margin. But when you watch the games, it like didn't really feel like you had like the super elite asset going on. If you at the end of the game on your fantasy finishes, it was okay, but it was all propped up by rushing touchdowns. And he may be losing Diggs this year. Diggs also dropped off for a lot of the second half of the season, but he also seems disgruntled. So like, do you have any concerns about Josh Allen? Do you still view him as like a super elite asset? Like I still view him as that, but like as the QB1. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, you know my opinion. I definitely still view him as a top dynasty asset. Mm-hmm. I mean, like you said, he might lose Diggs, but Diggs, kind of has gone missing the last 6 or so weeks anyways. So I don't think he'll be super hurt by that. And like you said, a lot of his fantasy points come from rushing anyways. He's always kind of been that player where he's going to win you a game or he's going to lose you a game in real life. Like he may throw 2 or 3 terrible picks, but he's also, capable of leading you to a winning touchdown drive the next play. So I feel like he just kind of is this wild player, but he generally puts up the fantasy points, and I think he'll still do it next year. So I'm not too worried.
Yeah. I mean, for fantasy, I would agree. I don't have concerns with his status going forward, especially in Dynasty. I'm in the league where I have him. I honestly don't think there's an offer that I would be willing to entertain accepting for him, because I feel like his value is that high in a super flex.
I'll retract my Jamar Chase offer.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good offer, but I just wouldn't like. There's nothing to me that's worthwhile to lose him. Now, that being said, right, it was a weird year to watch him. You could tell from week 1. I think I kind of described it as like he looks like he's just like losing his patience out there. He's come so close and he's had these like good teams that should have been Super Bowl contenders, and he came up short and then came up short again. And like, there's only so many times that you can have victory kind of like ripped from your hands before you start to kind of just like get a little impatient. And I feel like this year he's just out there like trying to do it all like on every single play, and that results in a lot of picks and a lot of bad throws, but it also results in a lot of good throws too. So like as an NFL quarterback, it hasn't obviously been great, and Buffalo's lost a lot of games because he's been a little careless. But for fantasy, he runs, he's a tank. His rushing this year, I feel like for the last, I don't know how many weeks of the season, he had multiple rushing touchdowns in week like 14, 15, 16,
it was
17.
Like 6+ weeks. Yeah. Some weeks 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. So, I mean, for fantasy, I love it. And, for real life, you'll see in our playoff brackets, I'm on the bandwagon for this year. I think this is going to be the year that they make a run to the Super Bowl.
I think you have a vested interest in this as well. Yeah.
We'll talk about it later. I'm lower than most on the Ravens. Oh, I don't want to say I'm lower on the Ravens. I think the Ravens are slightly, just a hair overrated, but.
All right. I'm excited to hear about this later. Just a touch. Talk about teams that used to be overrated, but I think everyone knows now stinks, is the Eagles. They just don't look good. They closed out the year with 5 losses in their last 6, and honestly could have been 6-6 with the only win coming against the Giants a couple weeks earlier. But then week 18, the Giants winning that game, I know I texted Joe this early in the morning, and then in the chat, another chat with you, Ryan. I was like, the Giants money line is a lock. Like I bet it hit it. Like it's a lock going in. The Giants are an elite team when it comes to running the draft back. Like if that's on the line, they will win that game. I don't care who the opponent is. But yeah, I mean they're looking kind of exposed. The Chiefs kind of look exposed either going to the playoffs. I know they have a home field coming on in the game that I probably won't watch because it's on Peacock and I'm not paying for that. But they don't look that great either. And then other teams like Pittsburgh, I know made the playoffs. Not a team that Joe believes in, but Tomlin again refusing to have a losing season. So a lot of teams that you're not really that excited about, or you're a little concerned about, I think, as the fan base going in. But as the team you are excited about is the Texans making the playoffs and winning the AFC South. But any other teams in the playoffs or any of these teams I mentioned that kind of stand out to you, or you want to comment on about how much they stink?
I'm half expecting the Chiefs and specifically Travis Kelce to come out like gangbusters against Miami and kind of blow them out. I just feel like there's been a little bit of I think that Kelce's off the field situation has been a little bit of a distraction for him, and that coupled with the fact that he's honestly getting older and slowing down a hair has had an impact on their offense, significant impact on their offense. But their defense is still pretty strong, and Miami's down a significant amount of players on both the offense and the defense. So I would not be surprised. And then, assuming that kind of Buffalo holds serve at home against the no TJ Watt Steelers, right? If Buffalo and KC both win, then we have that same matchup again. And, KC will be favored in that game. Well, actually, I don't know. It's in Buffalo. I can't really conjure a guess of what the spread would be, but, all of a sudden KC is a win away from being right back in the AFC Championship. So, I think that for all that we've had these conversations and this dialogue this season about what's wrong with the Chiefs, I would not be super surprised if they smash Miami and then beat Buffalo like they always do. And before you know it, it's, they're right back potentially on the cusp of the Super Bowl again.
Yeah, that's literally exactly how I feel, and we'll talk about it later. But I think the Chiefs, don't look scary, but come playoff time, I still wouldn't want to play them. And I don't know, Andy Reid, come the playoffs, I just feel like they're going to put something together and win a few games somehow. And then the Eagles, like you said, Dave, they don't look great. I wouldn't count them out, but I don't think they'll make it to the Super Bowl. I think they're definitely have some issues that will probably come into play. And then you got the teams like Pittsburgh. I was looking at playoff bracket. I just couldn't even believe they're there. Like, I don't understand how Pittsburgh is in the playoffs, but
Mason
they are
Rudolph,
somehow. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, Jordan Love and the Packers, in the playoffs as well. Mm-hmm. Don't think they'll go too far, but kind of another interesting team that you never really know. I could see them pulling off a win or two.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty high in not for the playoffs, but the Packers going forward. I think they got a lot of interesting assets, and Jordan Love has actually impressed me. I think I'm a believer in him.
He's had a good year, yeah.
He makes some pretty impressive and like elite throws, like the way like off balance and like with all arm and the touch on it. It's I don't know how certain teams just keep getting lucky with quarterbacks, but the Packers never have to worry about it. It's very frustrating. But good for them. It
doesn't really make any sense that he looked terrible in any appearance that he ever had. Anytime he sniffed the field while Rodgers was on the roster, he looked awful. And this year it's been a night and day difference. And it was right from week one. He looked competent right from the beginning, and he's only gotten better. These last couple of weeks were, like you said, just super impressive. Yeah.
I was like, this guy, I don't think he's fully viewed there yet, but I'm personally ready to potentially buy him early as a top 10 quarterback going forward. Like he has a lot of upside there.
Yeah.
But obviously there's other teams with quarterback questions as well. Obviously giving praise to the Packers, but the team they beat, the Bears, they have the first pick overall, and they also have Fields in the roster. So very interesting to see what they go there and see if you got so many thoughts there. But also the reason they have that first pick is because the Panthers stink. And if you're the Panthers franchise, I just don't know like what you do after the season, having no pick and it being the top one. But very interesting directions for both those franchises moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Chicago's instance, it's just
They got to pick a quarterback, right? I mean,
I don't know. What I was going to say was like my take is I think they should trade the pick, and I just the value that they could get for that pick, I just feel like there is always a question mark with these quarterbacks. Like if they keep the pick, I completely get and understand the argument of you're getting a young quarterback on a more like salary cap friendly contract for an additional 3 or 4 years than Fields, who you can extend for the 5th year, but then after that you basically have to pay him, unless you want to give him the franchise tag. Like, I mean, you could do what you got to do to drag this out, but if you're not drafting a quarterback now, it's because you believe in Fields, so you may as well just sign him. So.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Like, yeah. Do they believe in Fields though? I just can't imagine they're sitting there thinking Fields is the long-term answer. And if you trade that pick, you gotta be all in on Fields.
It's more like the evil you know versus the evil you don't. Because like Fields played good enough the end of the year that there's hope. You're not expecting to be an elite quarterback, but if he has the right weapons, which you can now potentially draft, and his rushing ability, he can get it done. DJ Moore had a great year. But also, like, are you going to pass on a potential elite option? Like, you know that what Fields' ceiling probably is, but you could be getting out with a higher ceiling. But how many of these top quarterbacks that we've seen flamed out? It's like it's a crazy rate, actually. I feel like the top quarterbacks, you're lucky. Like, it's like a 30% hit rate, even if the first overall pick. So like
they're significantly more likely to be disappointed with whoever they were to take. Yeah. And like, I guess the way I think about it, if I heard tomorrow that the Giants traded the 106 or 107 for plus whatever, maybe even another pick or for Justin Fields, I would be ecstatic. It would be one of like the happiest that I'd been about a move that the Giants have made.
They don't have to trade the 106 for Fields.
No, I'm saying if they did, right? I don't know. I think he's worth a first round pick. You don't think he's worth a first round pick?
Because of the contract situation.
I would almost guarantee. Well, we're not really going to know because they're going to keep him. But if Sam Darnold got a second round pick, and he was not good, I feel like Fields would get a first. Right. And if the Giants were to trade him for a first, I think it would be a great move. I'd be excited as a fan. I think that I have enough faith in him to get it done. So I feel like that's why, if you're the Bears, look what you did last year by trading back. You just do the same thing again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And the Panthers just got to sit and watch. It stinks. But also, one last thing I want to touch upon Black Monday, as people refer to it, but basically it's kind of dragged on all week, is there's been a lot of coach departures that have been going on. So currently we have 7, I believe, official, or was it 6 official openings, and one that's likely going to be an opening, just it hasn't become official yet. But got the Seahawks are now open with Pete Carroll out, Commanders with Ron Rivera out. The Raiders is technically open because Antonio Pierce was the interim coach, and I still think they are looking at potentially at Jim Harbaugh, I think is the one that they're looking at, or Antonio Pierce. The Panthers, I mean, just everything's clean house there. It was Frank Wright. I don't even know who the interim coach was there. I'm going to be honest. I don't think anyone cared. I was reading an article, no one even referenced it because he's not even up for the job, which is crazy. Falcons, Arthur Smith finally is gone. Titans, Rabel is gone, which seems like a weird move. I understand it based on some of the results, but there's no talent on that roster, and he's one of the best coaches in the league. I don't see how you get better from Rabel, so like I don't know. It seems stupid. And the Pats are likely to move on from Belichick. They're just being very they're trying to get the PR right on how they exit Belichick. Really, sounds like Vrabel might be the Pats head coach next. But
Yeah,
we'll
well, I mean, like that. Now that Vrabel's available, it's like if they were on the fence about Belichick, they're like, "I'm sorry, Bill,
get out."
but
Yeah, it's the perfect pick. An expat, get
like
him over.
Vrabel's like a top probably 5 coach in the league,
Yeah, he's
and
one of
he's
the best
available,
coaches.
and he's an expat, so this is the time. So
Yeah,
I think Bill's is definitively gone.
yeah, 100%. I don't think there's any chance he's not. But what other of these openings do you find are interesting, excited about, or or is there a position that you are hoping one of these coaches land or a coach lands in one of these spots?
I mean, we've been talking about Arthur Smith all year. So, Joe, how
Yes.
are you feeling now that he's finally out? Is your boy going to be free?
I hope so.
It's
funny how like it took. I'm like watching the Week 18 games, and Bijan Robinson is rolling to like an 80-yard touchdown reception and getting a ton of action. But it was a weird season. I'm happy that Arthur Smith is out. I think there's probably a spectrum of guys. I know, Dave, you have opinions on who you want it to be. I feel like regardless of who it is, the overwhelming majority are going to use their stud running back. So I don't think that it could get worse. I think it could only get better, frankly. So for me, this is a good day. I think the stocks sign is certainly pointing up on Bijan.
Yeah, I mean, Bijan had the long reception, but that was the thing which was kind of annoying to me. You want to see your running back get receptions, and Bijan was being used in that way. But he was like predominantly only in the reception game. Like every time they're in the red zone, it's Patterson and like multiple plays in a row. Like Bijan's not even getting on the field. If he does, it's like only to get a reception, not running the ball. So I think any coach would be like, all right, let's like attempt one rush with Bijan and just see what happens. I don't know. Just give it a trial run.
Touchdowns were from like the 7, 8, 9 range.
Yeah,
he didn't give it to him.
Yeah,
and he'd score every time.
Because he's great. Like he's like, but like 3 yards might be too much for this guy. I don't know.
Yeah, much rather Desmond Ritter throw it directly to the defensive back. I swear to God, I said that on a podcast like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and like the last like 2 or 3 weeks from then until the end of the season, there's been a play where he's thrown it directly to the DB, and I'm like, I got to text Dave and Ryan right now because this is the one.
And again,
every single week.
But it is going to be interesting to see where potentially Jim Harbaugh lands after Michigan won the college championship. So shout out to Adam Cohn, Interleague. He was at the game. But obviously he's one of the hottest names in there. There are a lot of big names available too, which is going to be pretty interesting. I feel like you don't really have this many key names. But we'll see where everyone lands. Pete Carroll is he's an advisor, so he probably won't be available there. And Nick Saban also is now retiring too, so throwing that out there. This one less college-ranked person who's going to get drawn away.
Yeah, the one job that interests me the most, I think, is probably the Washington job, although they're notoriously a poorly run franchise, and they, for the longest time had the worst owner in the league. They've, since corrected that, and I think they're actually a pretty desirable spot moving forward. They're going to have the number 2 pick, so they're going to get one of the top 2 quarterbacks. They have good offensive skill players.
How shares are done.
Like their defense is still bad, and their 2 best defensive linemen are currently on other teams, having a lot of success. So, it's unfortunate that they're going to have to rebuild the defense, but from an offensive standpoint, if they can hire an offensive coach, then, I think for fantasy, there's a lot to be excited about, right? Like, I hate to say it, but like for me, I'm not totally giving up yet on Jahan Dotson. And I think obviously Terry McLaurin has always had like quarterback challenges since he came in the league, even though he's been a pretty high level, or what I would consider a pretty high level wide receiver. So maybe in the Drake May era, as what it's likely to be, with a new coach, then their offense can turn it around next year.
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of weapons, and I was just quickly looking up. They have the most cap space too. So like, even though the defense stinks, they can quickly correct that. That was one of the reasons why they traded some of the defensive guys away, is to create that cap space. So
Right.
that can be a very quick rebuild. I think they got a lot of the assets in place. But with that said, kind of want to jump in to, this a little bit of a year in review and kind of hit on some of the players or trends over the year that stood out for our fantasy team. So first going to hit on to who are some of the biggest fantasy heroes and biggest hits for you. And I'm just going to run through some names at the positions, and you guys can jump in and talk about the ones that kind of stick out to you. But at quarterback, some of the big names that really kind of beat what you thought they were going to beat what their value was going into the season. You have obviously Brock Purdy shot up. Dak Prescott finishes like the QB2. Jared Goff finished in top 10. Sam Howell had a great year, but ended pretty rough, and probably going to lose his job to a draft pick. It's all right. Maybe someone else will take him. Jordan Love, we mentioned. Stafford actually bounced back big time, and a million backups, but none more importantly than Joe Flacco. So those are some of the quarterback ones. I don't know if any of you guys have any thoughts before I dive into some of the other positions.
I mean, one of the bigger ones for me is Dak Prescott, just because he finished as the QB2. Like, it wasn't out of the realm of possibilities that he'd have a good season, but I don't think anyone was projecting him to be a top 3 fantasy quarterback. So that's pretty crazy. And then the other two that kind of stick out to me are Stafford. Just had quite a comeback. I was kind of down on him this year after last year, so to see him really turn it around and maybe even have some playoff success here was pretty cool. And then, like you said, Joe Flacco just literally coming out of nowhere to run the Browns, and it's been pretty fun to watch.
I think he was he might have been like the QB1 over the
he's literally been
fantasy playoffs. He was insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I just can't believe that he wasn't even playing, and then he's been like a top 3 fantasy quarterback. It's been unbelievable.
I don't understand why he wasn't playing, to be totally honest. Just like at home sitting on his couch while the likes of, Tommy DeVito are starting NFL games. But the one thing I'll say about Sam Howell is that I don't think he'll be out of the league. I think he'll be a good backup at worst. And, depending on what team he's on, whether it be Washington or another team that doesn't have like a locked and loaded starter, he could challenge.
The Falcons may trade for him. The Falcons can use him. Right?
I mean, they don't have to trade much. So
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, come on, Hal, get a job. Moving to some of the running backs, you had some people who really showed up. I'm going to start with my favorite, but then I'll get to the big one. But Devon Achane blew up, had a wild yards per carry. Kyren Williams, I think that he's like the headliner there. I came out of nowhere and finished at RB4, and he missed some games. Guy was an absolute stud there. I'll let Joe get into the spiel again, but I'm a believer now, and if I could, I would be trying to acquire him. Hopefully, people trying to sell high on him. Rachaad White also dominated most of the year. He was like a top 10 quarterback all year long. Finishes in like the top 7-6. Travis Etienne finishes like RB3. Kind of a weird year, but when he scored his touchdowns, he scored them in bunches and had some massive weeks. Both Jamar Gibbs and David Montgomery finishes top 15 running backs. Gibbs, I think, was at 10. Montgomery at 13, I believe. Montgomery obviously cooled down a little bit in the back half of the year, but still was a very strong finishing. He gets a lot of the touchdowns there. So I think both have great assets. Isaiah Pacheco is looking like the answer for the running game for the Chiefs. And even Devin Singletary, who was like, I had to give him some credit because the run game in Houston looked horrible. And then for some reason, Devin Singletary solved it and was proved to be very useful. I wouldn't call him a leap, but very useful with some pretty big weeks down there.
Yeah, so I feel like in fantasy football, you got to take your wins with your losses. And this list, kind of the guys you just went through, it's funny how like Kyren was a big win for me. And right below that are Rachaad White and Travis Etienne, two guys who I didn't touch in any draft that I was a part of. Couldn't possibly have been lower on either of them, and they both kind of proved me wrong this year, finishing RB3 and RB6. I drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in a home redraft league and was disgusted with the pick and was trying to trade him between weeks 3 and 7, and now he's maybe looking like one of the more dynamic running backs in the league. And looking like. I mean, obviously they signed Montgomery to I think it was a 3-year deal in the
Yep.
offseason.
Yeah,
So
he's not going
that'll
anywhere.
be a 1-2 punch between the two of
Oh, yeah.
them for the next couple years. And there's plenty to go around. It's a good offense. Like you said, Montgomery gets more of the goal line stuff, but especially over the last couple of weeks, Gibbs in the passing game. And when he does get opportunities to run, he
It's electric.
runs explosively. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean it's interesting that the Lions had two top 15 running backs on the year, and like you said, it should continue for the next couple seasons, which is pretty crazy. I think Rashad White is the most shocking just because it was never talked about. Like you said it before, Dave, but it still feels like it's not talked about. Like if
Mhm.
you approach someone about him, I feel like they wouldn't be that high on him, but he finished as the RB6 on the year. I think it was 7 after the last week, but
Mhm.
up there. And then ETN finished as the RB3, but he's the one I'd be the most worried about because, he didn't have a great middle of this season. And I don't know. I think there's some risk there that he's not a top 5 running back next year. So I think he's someone you maybe look to trade away if you can still sell really high.
That's actually exactly what I was going to kind of pose to you. Between White and ETN, who would you rather have?
yeah, let's play this game with ETN because there's a couple. Between White and ETN, I would rather have ETN.
I think I'd rather have White, but I'd rather trade ETN because I think you can get significantly more for that. Like if I had ETN, I would probably go to the White owner and go White plus and feel better about because ETN just didn't look elite to me. Like it was a lot of touchdowns there, but he was very inefficient in a lot of games, and he doesn't catch the ball nearly as much as like White does. So like I have more confidence that White will repeat his season more than I think ETN will next year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm more on Dave's side. I just felt like White was more consistent. ETN had bigger blow up games, but I think there's a better chance that White has more of a consistent season next year.
What do you say about Kyron Williams or ETN?
Kyron, I'm trying to. I think the Rams are all in on Kyron now.
James Cook or ETN?
I'd probably go ETN there just because it's hard to trust
Yeah,
the rushing
yeah.
game in Buffalo.
Yeah, Josh Allen's too much the rushing game there, but I like Cook, but I think between the two, you got to go ETN.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think I would probably take each of those guys over ETN. But I would take ETN over Rashad White. I don't know. I'm still not totally in on Rashad White. I don't know. I'm one of. I have to. They like the ballers always say, stay water.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that needs to be like advice that I need to take to heart because I kind of form these opinions of people and it takes a lot for me to
Gotta be like me.
reverse.
I reversed course in Kyron real quick. I think it was like I was like, all right.
Me too, Dave was like,
I know watching it, I was like, whoa, this is. I think they put a different guy in his jersey. This is not the same guy I remember watching before.
Yeah.
But moving on to the wide receivers that really stepped up this year, he had CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 1, who I'm definitely going to bring up and want to see where you guys land on there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think finished at the wide receiver 3, another guy who like really leveled up, and if you have him, I'd be ecstatic. Puka Nacua, we already mentioned, but he was finished in the top 5. Brandon Ayuk really made that leap to that many people were hoping for, just on a fringe of being a wide receiver 1. DJ Moore, even though he was a bit inconsistent, had some huge weeks. So that one monster week really propped him up, but he finished in the top 10. Nico Collins and Tank Dell both had great seasons. Very rarely did they happen at the same time, unfortunately, due to injuries back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see how, when they're both healthy next year, this offense looks. But both guys look great, and I'd be excited. Like Nico finishes the top 10, huge week 18. Mike Evans, probably like the pick, the most value pick in all drafts. He finishes the wide receiver, I think 5, and huge year with Baker. And then Keenan Allen was also like absolutely elite before he got hurt. Even with the injury and missing the final 4 weeks of the year, he finishes the wide receiver 8. So he just was putting up monster numbers all year long. Another rookie I want to throw out is just Rashee Rice. He's been flashing a good amount to close out this year as a rookie, and that offense that we mentioned with the Chiefs that need some other offensive firepower outside of an aging Kelsey.
Yeah, so again, coming along as the Grim Reaper, talking about guys that are near their cliff, right? So Evans and Allen. I mean, as somebody who traded Evans in our league, what do you guys think, right? Do you think? I mean, I think his contract is up, so this is going to potentially be his last year in Tampa Bay. What are you thinking about the future for each of those guys? I mean, obviously, Allen, I think, is a little bit older than Evans. Mm-hmm. I personally am higher on Evans moving forward than Keenan still. Keenan is a little more injury prone, and like I said, I think he's like a year or two older. But how do you value the two of those guys moving forward?
Dynasty, it's an interesting question. I think the trades, because both guys were traded at the deadline in our league, and I think it was like the perfect trade for both. Like if you're a contender, I think these guys are still very helpful. And if I'm contending, I would probably keep them because I don't think you're going to most likely get the value that you expect to. You might be able to sell a little bit higher in Mike Evans than most, but I still think they're going to be very useful next year. The Mike Evans situation with the contract will be interesting if he ends back up in Tampa Bay or where he goes. So there's a little bit of question mark there, but I think he'll still be fine. I think I feel more comfortable with Evans because I feel like his floor is a little bit higher. But the Keenan, there is still the potential. Like the Chargers need to add offensive weapons right now. If they don't, Keenan's going to get the reason he was so good, he was getting a stupid amount of targets this year, absolutely insane. If they don't add other weapons, it's going to happen again. Can his body handle it? Who knows? If you've seen his shoulder blade is popping out of his jersey. The guy, his body is rejecting. It's ridiculous. So I don't know how much more he's got left in him, but
I think he was a huge benefactor of Austin Eckler. I think sort of losing a step. Like you said, he just was getting every single target there. Mike Williams went down for the year. Eckler wasn't himself. I mean, Keenan Allen was their only real legitimate offensive weapon. So he got everything. I think I'd be more concerned with him going into next year if things do change, if they, switch it up or, Mike Williams will be back maybe and, see what goes on there. I think they're both still pretty valuable next year, but you are playing that game with both of them now of when's that year going to come where their value really starts to tank. So I think if you're contending, they'll probably help you next year. If you're not, maybe you try to sell high now while you can.
Yeah, but I do want to bring up one guy, and I want to get your opinion. CeeDee Lamb, is he in the same tier as Chase and JJ now?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he's got to be. He's tied to Dak Prescott too. I mean, Prescott has looked, great this year, like we said, QB2 finish. So
not to get an extension.
He's got to be in the So I mean, Lamb's got to be in that elite tier now, I would think.
Yeah, crazy year. I mean, obviously, I own him in a stupid amount of leagues. I know Joe has seen it too. I couldn't get away from him, and I actively try to not draft him in certain leagues just because I have too many shares of him. But now I'm like, you know what? It was worth it. It paid off. He had an unbelievable season.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with him was just Dallas's lack of, commitment to just feeding him the ball constantly. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like at a certain point this year, they were like, well, nobody can defend him. So if we just throw it to him every single time, then we're going to score a lot of points.
Yeah,
and
they did.
It's worked out perfectly. Yeah,
so 181 targets.
It's honestly absurd.
It's stupid. He finished the season with rushing too, with over 8. I think he was over 1,800 or even 18,500 total offensive yards, which is just crazy. And I think 14 total touchdowns. Just crazy year. I'm very excited about him going forward. Any other wide receivers you guys want to talk to? Or you want to jump into some quick tight ends?
Let's move to the tight ends.
Yeah, let's go tight ends.
All right. So there were a couple of names that showed out. Number one overall, I think everyone's heartthrob these days is Sam LaPorta. The rookie sensation just dominated as the tight end one, which has never been done by a rookie. It was absolutely insane. And he's definitely the tight end one, I think, as of right now in all of Dynasty. But TJ Hawkinson showed out. Obviously, had an ACL injury late in the year, so we'll see how that impacts next year. But he was showing out in that offense all season long, despite the rotating quarterback situation there. Trey McBride, after week 7, dominating. Looks like a potential top 3 tight end going forward. Which is nuts because you actually, after his rookie year in the first few weeks of the season, you thought he might not be anything, and now he's like top 3. It's nuts. And then just want to give a shout out to also Jake Ferguson because he finishes a top 10 tight end. Looked very good. Again, looks like he'll be an integral part of the offense going forward. And he was a very late round guy that you probably got going into the season. And I know for me, in one of my other dynasties, I got him out of free agency the year before. And now he's like one of the top tight ends that you can have. So that's a guy who definitely shot up in value. I think even after the rookie draft, people thought the Shoemaker was going to be the tight end one, and it turned out Ferguson stole the job and became an elite option.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because you like watching Dallas as a Ferguson owner and as a frequent Ferguson anytime touchdown scorer wagerer. Shoemaker still gets like quite a bit of goal line targets, and they I think they even have a third like white tight end that confuses me when I'm like trying to find
Hendershot, something
trying to find Ferguson's targets.
I know they all look the same. They have the same thickness of arms.
One number each. Like one of them's 88, one of them's 87, another one's 89. It's just but yeah, I mean honestly, he looked good, and he seemed to tail off a little bit at the end. I don't know if that was just me. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
I think it was just CD getting all the targets.
Yeah, pretty much. But he had a stretch early, middle of the season where he was scoring a ton, getting a ton of targets, putting up a lot of yards. So, and Trey McBride, let's just hope that he keeps this going and it's not just a flash in the pan. I think he was pretty hyped coming out of college as a potential.
He was the first tight end drafted, I think, in the second round in that draft.
Yeah, like a potential like offensive producing tight end. So we'll see. He's in the same offense. He's keeping the same quarterback. So hopefully he'll be in a better offense next year. Hopefully they'll add some more dynamic offensive skill guys and keep that momentum going.
Yeah, and another guy I just wanted to mention was Evan Engram. I feel like, he was someone preseason you were kind of hoping would have a good season, and he actually finished as tight end 2 on the year, which is pretty crazy. So his stock has gone way up since, prior to this year as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great call out. He was so consistent all year long. He was just getting so many targets. He was I think like the second read in the Jags offense most of the way. He just wasn't getting touchdowns throughout the year. So like it's why he never was having like the big boom weeks, but he was always like in the top 10. But at the end of the year, he started getting those touchdowns, and you really saw the upside there. So I think that's actually someone we'll get into the section later. But that's someone who I think is going to continue to rise next year and be someone who I'd be trying to potentially get on my team on, if possible, the cheap. But with all those hits, they were definitely misses this year's as well. We had a quarterback, a bunch of them, many due to injury. I try to limit the injury ones as much as possible, but if they look bad before injury, they're going to make the list. But yeah, Kenny Pickett just looked bad. Daniel Jones, don't know. I mean, I'm still blaming some of it the offensive line, but wasn't great. Trevor Lawrence, he disappointed based on what went on. I do think his issue was that, and I'm just going to say this now, get it out of my system, and you guys can believe it or not. But he tried to not miss games, and I just think he was injured, like basically most of the season. Like this past week, I don't think he would have played if it wasn't for he had his AC joint was messed up. If it was an October game, I don't think he plays. He had a bum arm. Then he had like a concussion, and then he tried to get back from. Then it was a high ankle sprain, and another one. He just kept forcing his way back. So I don't think he was ever fully healthy. I don't think he excuses all the mistakes that he made this year, but I do think that was a big factor there. But it happens. He was on the field. You wanted more, and you had a down season. Deshaun Watson, more so because Flacco just looks so much better than Watson ever looked. It's crazy. And then Bryce Young, call out again. He's a rookie, but you want to see flashes from rookies. He did start the last couple of weeks, have a couple plays here and there, but still, it's just like it's hard to get excited after his rookie year. The build off there weren't many plays or moments. He never had a moment that you're like, okay, this is like potential there. So kind of down on all those. But I don't know if there were any other quarterbacks that stood out to you or ones you kind of want to elaborate more on.
Well, it's funny, Dave. I think our preseason picks, yours had to do with Kenny Pickett
Yeah.
and had to do with Daniel Jones, and I don't think
we're not bringing those back up. I think
we couldn't have been more wrong on those.
They were bold. They were bold. This is this is why they were bold.
Yeah. So yeah, those were huge misses. Trevor Lawrence, I am still relatively high on them. Like I still think he's an asset, and I think he'll be good next year. Watson's the one, like you said, with Flacco coming in and looking so good. I don't know. I would be looking to get rid of him if I could. I just wouldn't want to stick with him.
I hate Watson.
The thing is, they have no
cap space,
no option but to stick with him. Like the amount of dead cap hit they would need to take if they were to cut. I want to say, I could be wrong, but like I heard it was like
I just brought it up. So
$200 million, is that right?
Yeah, if they cut him, it is basically $200 to $1 million dead cap hit.
Yeah, that is the most ridiculous
It's
thing.
out of control.
Yeah.
Like
so, he's and in his defense, right? Like he got hurt. He looked like shit last year, but I do feel like he started off this year pretty strong. He looked okay. He was running the ball. He had a couple of rushing touchdowns. He was looking all right. Like I think we remember, like whatever week that was, 6 or 7 or 8, when he went out for the season, thinking that this was going to like deal a blow to the Browns' Super Bowl hopes, right? As if they were like a contender with Watson. So he was playing good football then. It's just, it's going to be an interesting dynamic if Flacco takes them to, a deep postseason run or even the Super Bowl. And then
I don't think they can afford Flacco now. He's played his way into a bigger contract.
They're going to have no choice to just go back to Watson next year. Like there's like literally no other option for them. So crazy. And Bryce Young, capital B.
Yeah.
Bust.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Sorry.
Yeah. And like even Levis had like flashes. Like you just never saw it from Bryce, which is
he has arguably the least amount of pocket awareness of any quarterback that I watched this entire season, like including all the backups. Like literally the guy just has no awareness, and like it strip sack, like he's worse than Jones. Like it's tough to watch. So
yeah,
unfortunately he's a bust.
Sorry, Panthers.
Tried to trade for him from Harry and Dan this year, and I appreciate you guys declining that offer.
Yeah. Save me from myself.
Yeah.
But moving to some bust running backs, there's Tony Pollard. More so, it was okay for your team, but you were expecting a high-end asset, and he's like a low-end RB2. Ramondre Stevenson, weird year for him. Injury kind of derailed when he looked like he was starting to bounce back, but you definitely had higher hopes for him. Personally, for me, like Antonio Gibson was someone I just want to throw it out there because I had a lot of hopes that he'd be good, and he just back to being bad again. Dameon Pierce is probably the biggest one that a lot of people were pretty high on going into the season, and then just really disappointed. And looks like he may not even have too much of a job going forward. But the biggest bust of them all, easily, is Miles Sanders, which I was high on him. I know, Joe, you were as well. And, like, I don't even know. Is it just if you're a Panther, you just stunk? Like, I just don't get what happened there.
I was going to say, do you think Bryce Young affected that? Is that
No, I think it's Sanders.
You think it was Sanders?
Chuba Hubbard was great.
That's true.
Sanders stunk.
I think that they gave him a 4-year, $25 million contract. It was the biggest running back contract that was given in the offseason, just for him to like come in and promptly hit his physical running back cliff. Like I think that's what it is. I honestly think that he just like lost his step at some point between when last season ended and when he signed that $25 million contract, and he literally just essentially robbed Carolina of $25 million because he's the second best running back on the team, and they'll probably end up cutting him eventually. And I mean, he's probably a better version of Dalvin Cook right now. Like I think he's a little better than Dalvin, but not much better from a fantasy or from a real football perspective. So it's unfortunate. I traded up for him in our startup. They always say to follow the money, and there were high hopes in Carolina this year with Bryce coming in, and you thought Miles was going to be the workhorse, and it ended up being Hubbard. Quite frankly, if Miles Sanders had Hubbard's season, I'd be looking back and very, very pleased with how that trade up turned out. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, it just goes to show you that you don't want to give many running backs. Like I don't even know how many there are out there. Yeah, like Saquon, I love you, man, but if the Giants give him a contract, I won't.
Yeah, they better not. And I think one of the things that was Miles Sanders' undoing or downfall was last year when he was on the Eagles. The Eagles' offensive line is great, and that's where he was just like getting open lanes and just bursting through that. And that's where I believe DeAndre Swift is a free agent this year. And DeAndre Swift looked horrible. Goes to the Eagles, looks great, slicing things up. Although he can't, for some reason, he trips on the 1 yard line. He just can't get in the end zone. There's like a force field there for him. It's only for Jalen Hurts can pierce it. But I don't think the Eagles are going to re-sign Swift because they don't pay money to running back. So if you're going to the next year, there's a chance that Swift becomes this year's Miles Sanders potentially. So just something. Our listeners, all dozens of you, just keep that little nugget in mind when you're going into next season and you're following where the money goes with Swift, because Swift will get paid, but it's not going to be by Philly, I don't think. And if he doesn't have a strong offensive line, I don't know how he's going to show out there. Any other running backs that stick out to you? Nothing that really surprised. Like Najee, you can maybe talk to, but I think a lot of people expected this. Henry had like ups and downs, but these were all ones that kind of expected. So it was more of the players who we had higher hopes for. Some wide receivers. A lot of these we called out for. And I'm very excited because a lot of the guys that I hated sucked. And finally I got some hits there. I can't get the good players, but I can call the bad players. So, but T. Higgins was, I think, this year a complete bust. Wide receiver 46, obviously injury, but it's always injury with him. So I think that's kind of part of his game. But even when he wasn't hurt, he only had a couple big games here and there, but it wasn't that great. Jared Jeudy stunk, and I successfully acquired him and flipped him in another trade. As I called out, I was going to do in this pod, but he looks terrible. Jameson Williams looked terrible, but I will say he looked better the last couple of weeks, but I still don't think he's great. But it does seem like Detroit is kind of committed to trying to getting him involved in the offense. So maybe someone you can get for like a fourth round, third round pick, and maybe have some upside. But I wouldn't go too big on him. Calvin Ridley was a bit of a disappointment from what you thought you were going to get. Jahan Dotson, we already talked about. Like, what the hell? I don't even know what to say there. Garrett Wilson, but that was all offense in the QB. Jalen Waddle, he was hurt every game. Finished almost all those games, but hurt every game. But he was truly like the backup, like the wide receiver 2 in that team. Tyreek just like really dominated. Devonta Smith seemed like a wide receiver 2 most of this year. Christian Watson is a walking injury, and when he finally started to get it going, he got injured again. And Quentin Johnson just doesn't look like the answer. I think the Chargers are going to draft another wide receiver with a high pick, which is crazy after you did that with Quentin Johnson. But those are some of the big ones I want to call out if you guys have any thoughts on this or others.
Well, it's interesting. Most of these are wide receiver 2 on their teams. I think Ridley and Garrett Wilson are really the only like true wide receiver 1s on their teams. A lot of these guys have either studs they're playing across, or in like QJ's case, I guess they're just, rookies at this point. But, I think they're all misses. The ones that I think still will have quite a bit of value are probably Smith and Waddle. Waddle, if he's not always hurt, I think is a pretty good receiver. And Smith has A.J. Brown. So if something ever happens to A.J. Brown, I think he'd be really valuable. But it's interesting. A lot of these guys, I think, are just wide receiver 2s that you were kind of hoping for wide receiver 1 numbers from, and it just kind of turned out that they are actually just the wide receiver 2s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Because, if you think about, like, if you look at Devonta Smith's numbers, he was pretty consistent, and for a long stretch in the middle of the season, right? Like weeks 8, 9, 10 was the bye, 11, 12, 13, 14. He's getting double-digit targets. He's scoring 1, 2, 3, 4 touchdowns. Like it seemed like for a lot of this season, he was the number one target in the offense. And like we talked about earlier, Philly's offense has been a little bit weird, but I'm more confident in him moving forward because I think that he looked pretty good this year, and it's just like exactly like Ryan said, where like he's just in an offense where there's Hurts is running in touchdowns. He's got AJ Brown. He's got DeAndre Swift. He's got Dallas Goedert. He's got Quez Watkins every once in a while getting like I just think that it's I wouldn't necessarily consider him a true bust, but definitely a little bit of a disappointment at his ADP. Same thing with I mean I'll ride for T Higgins to the end because I feel like when he's out there he's a tremendous receiver, and I don't see any scenario where they're going to be able to re-sign him. So he's going to go somewhere depending on the situation and depending on what the Giants do. I'm like, I wouldn't be all that upset if he ended up coming to the Giants, but yeah, I mean, I think he's a great receiver, and this year specifically, he was more injury riddled for him than usual. I mean, he's definitely good for an injury or two each year and to miss a couple games, but this year he missed a shitload of games, and even the games that he played in, there were times where he was on and off the field and it was just a mess. So not really this year wasn't great for my case that he's better than Mike Williams, although
he was exactly Mike Williams.
Mike Williams wasn't there either.
To the death. There's no world in which Mike Williams is better than T. Higgins, but they are not all that different. At least this year, they were not all that different from just what they brought to the table in terms of production and injury and absence.
He's Mike Williams, but Ryan, I think that was a good call about a lot of these guys being wide receiver twos. But the thing is, like, everyone was viewing these guys as wide receiver ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like top 15 guys. And the fact of the matter is, it's just so hard for these guys to give you consistent, like, top 15 wide receiver outlooks. Now, Dynasty, obviously, you're projecting out a few years, but you're viewing that output that you're going to get this year, and I don't see a path for most of these guys. Like Wilson, I think is going to be fine, but I don't see consistent, like, high-end 2 wide receiver 1 paths for, at least next year, for a lot of these guys as well. The Smith situation too, like, I don't think that some of these, like, I don't think Smith's not talented. I think Higgins is talented in certain situations, but he's just Mike Williams, where, like, you're going to blow up and you're not going to get, like, I can't get away from, like, I feel like I don't want to say Kenny Galladay, because Galladay is like, that's like the worst case scenario of it, but I don't see that ever. But, like, that's just the type of wide receiver these guys are. But Waddle too, like, Waddle has these blow up moments, but when they have the alpha on the other side, it's hard for them to get that consistent target volume. But for Smith in particular, there's just so many different targets there, and it's not a high passing volume offense at all. And Hurts didn't really make a step forward in his ability to pass, at least this year, but they're still not passing a lot. And, like, Hurts doesn't throw a ton of touchdowns either. So, like, if it's a small pie and you have to split it up, like, I just don't see how Smith is going to give you high end numbers consistently. Like, I'm sure if you had, like, the map of the AJ Brown games and the Smith games, there's very few that both did well. Because, like, I know there was that streak that you saw AJ Brown, who had, like, over 125 receiving yards. You can look, and that was probably and I'm just looking at Devonta Smith's games, and I'm going to say that was probably all the way, like, through week 7 when Devonta Smith had nothing. Then week 8 when he blew up. That was probably when AJ Brown's streak broke. Like, that's kind of how it went for those guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, so. Yeah, I mean, I would be fine having these guys on my team. You can't view them, in my opinion, as wide receiver 1, but I think everyone still does.
I think we'll see where Higgins ends up. I think
Higgins
if he were to stay in Cincinnati, then no, you couldn't. Then you could make the case. But depending on where he ends up, he could. It's going to be interesting because from a quarterback perspective, there's like almost nowhere he can go where he'll go to a better quarterback situation. But he'll likely go somewhere where he'll be number one receiver. So like, let's just say Buffalo. I like literally just throwing something out here, right? Like Buffalo, like Diggs ends up leaving Buffalo, and T. Higgins goes to Buffalo. Like I think T. Higgins would be a monster in Buffalo because that's an offense where he get a lot of targets and opportunity. And
I sure will say I don't hate Mike Williams. I just like I think Mike Williams is a good asset. Like I would have been happy to have Mike Williams and T. Higgins on the Giants.
Let me ask you this.
But that is what they are. Like I don't think he is an elite. I don't think he's a top 10 guy. I think
Mike Williams has been in the league for 5 years at this point. Like is his rookie contract like just up right now?
No, he's on a second contract.
He's on a second contract?
Yeah, I think he's even longer than that, yeah.
Yeah, he's been in the league for a while now, looking him up. There's just so many Mike Williams. I got the right one.
I'm curious what
he's 29.
I'm curious what his second contract was like because the contract that T. Higgins is about to get, I can almost assure you, will be more lucrative than whatever the Chargers gave Mike Williams for his second contract.
This was Mike Williams' 8th season.
Yeah. So he got a 3-year, $60 million contract.
Okay. So we'll see. I mean, that's a good deal, but we'll see what Higgins ends up with. I think it'll be good money, honestly. In that range for sure. So.
And were they both Clemson guys too?
They were both Clemson.
They are the same player, dude. I'm telling you this. They are the exact same guy. What was T. Higgins drafted? What was his pick? T. Higgins. I'm pulling it up right now. Let's get it. We're doing it live, people. We're doing it live. Where's the Wikipedia? Here we go. Because Mike Williams was the 7th overall pick. And we got T. Higgins coming in. Oh, he was 2nd round pick. So Mike Williams is better.
Is he better though? I don't think
Anyway.
I'd rather have Higgins now for sure if he's going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I agree. But Mike Williams had big years. I'm just saying. They're the same player. Anyway, moving on to the tight ends. Because that were kind of hits. And this, like, it's tight ends. You didn't invest, hopefully, too much in a lot of these guys. Darren Waller was the one that had the highest hopes. And, again, I know I was personally high on. I know, Ryan, you too. A lot of it was injury. A lot of it was offense. But you just had such high hopes, and it fell short. Chig Okonkwo, even though he won me that bet, and he had a decent finish to the year, you just were expecting so much more. And honestly, a lot of that, the Hopkins signing kind of took some of the targets away, which limited his upside. But I'm still hopeful for him long term. He showed some flashes still, and he started getting more involved. But he definitely did not meet the top 10 tight end most people thought you were going to get. And I just want to call Pat Freiermuth. Outside of that one game against, what was it the Bengals, Joe? Is that the team that you always bet against? He stunk. He was just bad most of the year. But so that was someone who many people were viewing as a top 10 tight end in Dynasty. I don't think I view him as a top 10 Dynasty tight end after this year, but I don't know if you guys had any other tight end thoughts here.
I mean, Darren Waller's got to be the biggest one, potentially the biggest miss we've talked about, except for maybe one of the two of the quarterbacks. He was literally being drafted as the tight end 3. I saw some drafts where he was even going as like the tight end 2 sometimes. People were super, super high on him going into this year. And yeah, it was a complete bust of a year for him. Mostly probably because of the offense. So maybe he turns it around a little bit next year. But the hopes you had for him this preseason, I think, are pretty much gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's just what comes to mind. Kelsey, disappointing. We talked about him a little bit earlier. I'm sure we'll talk about him again coming up. Dallas Goedert, I mean, he's relevant for me here in this league because I took him with a reasonably high pick in our startup. And he didn't end up – I think he finished as the tight end 14 on the year, which is still pretty strong considering he goosed in week 1 and then missed 3 games with injury in the middle of the season. But, you know, like it just didn't feel like he was as involved in the offense as you want him to be. And this probably goes back to what we were just saying about the Philly offense, where there's a lot of mouths to feed from an offense that runs first. So, not all that different of a case to make for his situation moving forward, as we were just kind of making for Devontae Smith, as they're just non-A.J. Brown pieces in an offense where there's a lot of mouths to feed and they do a lot on the ground. So probably not the best situation for him, but it's all right because I have Trey McBride. So
that's right. You upgraded. But with that, saying now that we've seen some of the hits or misses going into next year, and we touched upon a lot of players already, but if there's any other players you want to shout out or ones you want to kind of reiterate on is going into next year, what players do you think are going to start rising in value? Maybe like a Trey McBride who like shoots up and you want to try to potentially start targeting this offseason or maybe tell other people that they maybe should be going into. I can jump into some of them, but kind of want to open the floor up to you guys if there's any certain players that you think people should be kind of looking into that are on the up and up.
I think one that we talked about is Rachaad White, and I say that just because we saw Joe's response right away, which I feel like is the community's response. People just don't believe in him. So if you do, I feel like you can get a pretty good discount on him, a guy that could have another top 10 running back season. Ty Chandler is another one who, ended the year looking pretty good, and who knows what happens there next year if he does end up being the guy, or at least a 1A, 1B type situation. He could be pretty valuable, and you could probably get him really cheap right now, I would think. On the wide receiver side, the Commander wide receivers, if they do get a new quarterback, maybe their value does potentially shoot up. Mm-hmm. Another guy, Christian Kirk, he was having an amazing year until he got injured. We talked about Evan Engram. If they keep all those pieces and Lawrence, has a decent or even better year next year, I think he'll be pretty valuable again too.
Yeah, Christian Kirk, I like the call because I feel like people kind of forgot now because he's been hurt so long. Just how solid he was, that I feel like he is someone you could probably sneakily snag in a trade or maybe have a larger trade and kind of get him as another person added in there. So that'd be someone I'd be throwing in. There are some wide receivers, like Jaden Reed is someone I was growing on him throughout the year, and I think he might be the best wide receiver in Green Bay. He had a lot of touchdowns. He's almost like a Debo Light the way they use him, and it makes plays. And I can't get off the Shaheed train. I just love Rashid Shaheed. And I think he's truly the wide receiver 2 in that offense going forward. And again, I still think he's so cheap that you could probably get him. Of course, every time I target them, the person knows that I'm high on them. So they treat this guy like he's a top 24 wide receiver. I'm like, come on, man. Like, this is like barely a top 40 wide receiver. But that's definitely someone I'd be targeting as well. And obviously, there's players you can give a shot on. Bijan, maybe there's a disgruntled owner. Good luck. I'm a Bijan owner. I don't think I would do too much there, but he was going into this year as the RB1 in Dynasty. He may be down to the RB5. So there is potential that you're getting a discount there, but those are the type of things that I'd at least kick the tires on there. But Joe, I don't know if you have a couple thoughts on anyone.
Yeah, despite the frustrations with Bijan, and there was a lot of frustrations, he still finished this year as the running back 9. So it's really only we can, as an owner, I think it would be, I had frustrations and I definitely kicked the tires on moving him this year. But the fact that there's going to be new coaching coming in and the offense will look different next year, and hopefully they'll have somewhat of a functional quarterback. I think he's still way up there in terms of, if you were doing a dynasty startup draft right now. I don't know how you guys would value your running backs, but I think
he's up there.
I still think I'm still taking Bijan first.
Bijan, it's Bijan, Gibbs, Brees, and CMC are the three there, but I'd probably like those are the clear cut 4 for me. Maybe I throw in HN. I don't know. No, those are clear cut 4 for me. And but like when you factor in age, it's like probably those first 3 in a startup I'd be going for first. And honestly, I wouldn't. You can argue any of those 3 being RB1. So, but I'm fine with that.
Then from a wide receiver standpoint, I was saying, Christian Kirk injury. I feel like you should have added that to the list of excuses why Trevor Lawrence stunk this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of excuses. Ridley was not that great. I thought they were leveling up for a true wide receiver 1. So that's on my wish list. We're gonna have a wish list for the offseason and get Lawrence a true wide receiver 1. But yeah,
I think Ridley will find a new home, but I
agree.
He can still produce. I'm not totally out on.
No, I don't think he's bad. I just don't think he's like the alpha 1 that like you're trying to level up.
No, I completely agree. Or that they even thought that they were going to have.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Other couple sneaky ones. I already mentioned Jordan Love before, so I don't feel the need to get into that. But if I would be looking into trying to get Kyler or Fields, just to see what it takes to get them, because there's a chance that they're going to be thrown to Marvin Harrison Jr. next year, and their value is going to skyrocket. Like if the Bears don't trade Fields and they trade back, or they just go Marvin at 1, or if 3 quarterbacks go in a row with all the trades going on, and the Cardinals get Marvin Harrison, like I would be very excited because those guys will be catapulted easily into the top 10, but maybe even like top 7, top 5 next year. So I'd at least kick the tire, see if you can get them on the cheap there, because Kyler had a disappointing year overall. Fields had up and down, so you might be able to get him cheaper. And then tight end, I know Ryan, you talked about Ingram, but Njoku is one we haven't really mentioned because I know Joe hates him. No, but like he finally put it together, and he had a monster like back half of this year with Flacco. So that's another guy that who knows if people believe or not, but he has all the physical attributes, and he was drafted to be this type of tight end, and it's finally coming together. So might be someone, depending on your league, if people value tight ends, you could get again as a throw into a larger deal.
The problem with him, though, is he has to go back to Watson next year. He's literally finished as the tight end 6 because of Flacco.
Just force a trade to wherever Flacco goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I honestly liked what I saw from Dalton Kincaid this year, and I would love to be rising on him, but I think that Dalton Knox is still under contract for, I think it's like at least 2 more years before they can, and it might even be 3. So unfortunately, it's going to be a 2-headed monster with, we had those 3 or 4 games in the middle of the season where Knox was out with the injury, where Kincaid was a smash, and I just kind of think, Knox got the touchdown last week. Kincaid got, 6 targets to Knox's 2 or 3 targets. So it's just going to be a game with those 2 for the near term, trying to decide where the value is.
Yeah, it's really annoying when teams have multiple large featured white tight ends. It's very hard to keep track of what's going on there. But on the flip side, who are some players that you're trying to get out from, or maybe now is in peak value? I know, Joe, you were kind of mentioning this earlier in the pod, but there's certain players like you think this is peak value, you kind of want to trade them and get out from it, or it's just like you think their value could already be declining, but you want to get out before the wheels fall off. Kind of like if you had Dalvin Cook going into this past season, you may want to try to get out from it, and he is worthless now. If you get a 5th-round pick, you'd be excited. So are there any players that you're trying to move on? Obviously, there's some like obvious names, a lot of the aging players that we mentioned, a lot of the running backs. Kelsey seems like one that everyone's kind of like trying to maybe move on from, especially with all these young and hot tight ends coming up. But I don't know if there's other names that kind of jump out, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Kelsey a couple times. The position I'm in with Kelsey is basically really hoping that he has a strong playoffs. And if he does have a strong playoffs, then I'll look to sell him in the offseason for not 2 cents on the dollar, but, try to capitalize on the value because, there were off-field distractions this year. which I think contributed to his slight lack of production. He also just looked slow. He looked like he was running in quicksand compared to, even Noah Gray, who's just like the extra, V2, additional white tight end that KC has to back up Kelsey. I feel like for the second half of the year, anytime there was like a big dynamic downfield target to tight end, it was Noah Gray.
I know.
So if you're in a league where anybody will still have a league member who is going to attribute any value to J.K. Dobbins, he can be officially moved on from.
Yeah.
And
I was able to do that this year.
I was going to say, he apparently still has value in our league.
Jeez. Body is cold already. We got
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Gus Edwards actually had a really good year, but he's someone I don't think you'd be relying on going into next year. They probably, you would think, get someone else. But yeah, I think Kelsey is definitely the number one in terms of really valuable assets that you're getting a little worried about, and it could all fall apart next year.
Yeah. One guy that I feel like you could still potentially get value for is Josh Jacobs. I have concerns about him. Obviously, he had a bit of a down year and he was injured a bit, but he was playing on the franchise tag this year. It's going to be new coach, new regime. Don't know what they're going to do there. I don't know if they're going to want to pay him. I don't know where he's going to end up. So I would try to, who knows? Maybe his value goes up, but I don't know. I feel like if you trade him, there's a good chance you're not. If he goes to a better situation, you're not losing value on a trade. So, but there's a lot of downside wherever he goes. So I try to probably move on from him and cash in what you can. Wide receivers for me, I'm personally not high on Godwin. I still think a lot of people have a decent view on him in Dynasty. I've kind of been out on him for a couple of years now. Hollywood is someone that he was pretty bad this year, but people may think he's young. Maybe he signs a new contract somewhere, and that always gets people excited when they sign a new contract with new teams. I just don't think he's going to be a wide receiver one in any team. So maybe you can sell a little on the up and up after he signs somewhere. And Cortland Sutton, he just had an insane touchdown rate this past season. I just don't see that happening again. So you maybe can convince someone to be like, yeah, he was a solid wide receiver too this year. You definitely trade for him because I think his production is going to drop next year. But those are some of the guys I just wanted to call out for you.
Yeah, I would agree on Sutton. Cosign.
And then who are some players that you just don't know what to do with? It could be either injury, coaching situation, team, but players can go certain ways. One guy I want to call out is Herbert, Justin Herbert, because he was going in as a top 5 quarterback. He had some good weeks, but now it's going to have new coach, losing weapons. It's kind of hard to see what's going to happen there. I don't know where you guys are feeling.
Yeah, I'd still be high on Herbert, but you're right. We've talked a lot about the Chargers' offensive weapons this podcast alone, and you kind of don't really know what's going to happen there. But he did have a solid year, and I still think he's a top quarterback that you'd want to have over a lot of others. Mahomes is another one we've talked a lot about. I think he's still in that top tier, but he didn't have that top season this year. Does it really turn around and he's back in the top 1-2 next year? I don't know. I'm not concerned there, and he's definitely a valuable QB1, but if you were starting a draft today, I don't know if he would definitely still go 1 or 2 overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with Justin Herbert, I wouldn't be looking to pay top dollar and overpay, but I think that he'd probably be somebody who I would be willing to kick the tires on, looking to acquire with an owner who might potentially be a little bit down on the situation with, their weapons. And Staley was more of a defensive-minded coach, and there's a little bit of an opportunity for a blank slate, see who they bring in there next at QB. I don't think he had a terrible year, and from a dynasty standpoint, I think there's still much brighter days ahead for someone with the arm talent that he has. You could say what you will about their propensity to blow close games and kind of like melt in the clutch moments, but that's not exactly what we're always targeting with fantasy. So I still like him. I think he would still be somebody that I'd be willing to trade for. Yeah, I think that's probably how for me. I mean, the fact that he doesn't run certainly isn't ideal, but I'm still in. I'm not out on Justin Herbert just yet.
Yeah, a couple other guys. I'm curious, you guys' thoughts on. Obviously, we touched upon Stephon Diggs. He might be moving on. Cooper Kupp, consistency wasn't there this year, and because you had the emergence of Kyron and Puka, and Stafford is obviously getting older, so that's an interesting one. Mark Cooper, what quarterback he's going to have, and he obviously had some huge games with Flacco. He did good with Watson as well, though, so be interesting. Devontae Adams, he had flashes this year, but there's rumors he's going to get traded to the Jets now. So I don't know if you are worried about him or you're trying to get him, but of those guys, which ones do you feel is very murky, or are ones that you want to get in on or get out on?
I would be looking to get out on Kupp. It's actually weird, right? Like between the two, you would think that you'd be that Cooper would be the one that you'd be more uncertain about between Kupp and Cooper. But as someone who owns both, I think that I'm looking probably to capitalize. Again, similar situation with Kupp where depending on how he looks in the playoffs, I think going into next year, he's not going to. I mean, you could tell this year he just wasn't the top option in that offense anymore, and I don't necessarily know that he's going to, reclaim that position the older he gets. So I think if you can still get value for Kupp, and roll him into somebody who, maybe won't produce as much, next year, but will have a little bit more longevity. I think that I personally would be looking to move him.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Kupp's the one who I would probably be trying to move. I think you could still get pretty high wide receiver one value, and he's got to be the one that it's a little murky going into next year. He didn't have that great of a year this year, and Puka obviously emerged, and he's the one who's likely going to take over that wide receiver one role. So he's the one I'd be most concerned about. And then Diggs, I think it's just interesting to see what happens. Does he stay? Does he leave? That is going to change a lot of things for him. So I think you got to wait and see what happens before you move him.
Yeah, I think the playoffs will be very telling on what goes on. If they go far and potentially win the Super Bowl, I think that'll mend any problems they have going on in Buffalo. But yeah, moving on, I guess, going into the offseason, because again, this is the more fun time for Dynasty. What is on your wish list? What's one thing that you are hoping to see happen this offseason, whether it be a hiring, a trade, draft, or what signing, whatever? And one thing you're terrified of happening, and it could be personal, it could be for your own personal benefit on your teams or not.
So it's funny because you kind of just said my one wish. I'm counting this right now as the fantasy offseason, and I really want to see the Bills win the Super Bowl because I just think that mends so much between Allen and Diggs going into next year. If they win a game and lose to Kansas City or something like that in the second game, I think it's just going to be devastating for them. I think Diggs leaves, and then I think Allen's value takes a little bit of a hit going into next year. So my wish list is for a Bills Super Bowl so that they're all happy in Buffalo.
What about you, Joe?
I'm going to say Marvin Harrison Jr. to Arizona would be my wish because selfishly, as somebody who's in on Kyler in our particular Superflex Dynasty League, and with the aging but still productive Matthew Stafford as my QB2, if I could lock in Kyler with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride as his as his two big targets next year. I think I would feel better about
especially if you land
outlook
the 101
if they
yourself.
if they were to add a young dynamic wide receiver into that offense. That would I'm still high on Kyler, but that would be a huge bump to his value.
Yeah. And mine wouldn't help me in this league, but help me in other leagues. But is get in Atlanta, have the head coach become Ben Johnson, who's the OC from Detroit Lions, where that offense is dominated, and also make sure that the Falcons get a real quarterback as well, and just finally see what these highly drafted offensive weapons can do. And honestly, I think they have, the 8th pick for like the 4th year in a row now again. Like maybe they draft like another crazy wide receiver or tight end, who knows. But like just get these guys the ball and let's see what can happen. I just want to see that because I do have Bijan shares elsewhere, have Pitts at other spots. So like I want to see these guys succeed. Well, what else are you? What about being terrified? What is something that you're dreading? Because obviously, players' values can change in an instant based on signings. Arthur Smith coming and coaching your team, or what? So, what are you guys worried about happening? What about? Start with you, Ryan.
I mean, selfishly, I would have to say it's the Rams getting another running back, whether they acquire someone or draft someone. Kyron's value is sky high right now, and if anything happens there in the running back room, it's going to tank. So I'm really holding on to hope that he stays the RB1 there with no real competition into next year.
Yeah, for me, I guess we talked a lot about some of these wide receivers that I'm excited or we're excited about where they end up. And I just don't know. I'm hoping that they don't end up in New England because I'm not necessarily, I can already tell I'm not going to be high on the Pats offense next year. It's looking like it's going to be a Jaden Daniels likely situation, I had to say, but who's to say that they even take Daniels there? What if they try to trade for a quarterback and then draft Marvin Harrison Jr., which would be a catastrophe just because now Marvin Harrison is potentially getting wasted on the Patriots offense. So that would be not ideal. Someone like T. Higgins, who I'm excited about, his landing spot ending up in New England, that would be not ideal. So, yeah, I mean, I hate to dump on the Pats, and maybe they'll surprise me a little bit next year, but just the way they look this year, I don't know that their offense is just going to, like, suddenly turn it around and be dynamic again next year. So, from a fantasy standpoint, let's try and keep these productive and exciting wide receivers out of New England.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Pats would be a nightmare, especially because the Pats just ruin round 1 wide receivers.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. One. So, I mean, that's definitely one I'm worried about. Another one that I'm worried about, but I already know is happening, is the Commanders draft a quarterback. They're going to do that. But the other real one that is just that if Miami gets another running back, because Mostert's getting older, so you're going to assume that hopefully next year Achane starts taking more of that lead. But if for some reason they do bring in another running back with somewhat high investment, whether it be draft capital, like day 2 draft capital, or they sign someone to decent money just because they don't want to give Achane the workload, would not like to see that because Achane is electric and I don't want to see his value go down. So that one is a little selfish because my first one wasn't as selfish. But yeah, we'll see. A lot to unfold and unpack this offseason, and we'll try to keep you guys all updated as that goes on. But right now, we got the NFL playoffs, and I thought it'd be fun, first of all, to kind of just preview what we think is going to happen by breaking down our own NFL playoff bracket before closing out the show. So, Ryan, want to start us off with how your playoff bracket is looking?
Yeah, sure. I'll run through it quick. So, round 1 in the AFC, I went Cleveland over Texans. I'm going Flacco all the way. Would love to see him even win another game or two. I'm going the Chiefs over Miami, and I'm going Buffalo over Pittsburgh. And then round 1 in the NFC, I'm going Philly over Tampa Bay. I'm going to actually go the Rams over the Lions, and I'm going to go Dallas over Green Bay. And then in round 2, AFC, I'm going to go Baltimore over Cleveland, although I would really love to see Cleveland over Baltimore there. Sorry, Schluter. And then just to reverse jinx it, because I want Buffalo to win the Super Bowl, I'm going to go with Kansas City over Buffalo here. Really hoping that they don't do that to Buffalo again, but we'll see. And then in the NFC, I'm going to go San Francisco over the Rams and Dallas over Philly. In the AFC Conference Championship game, I'm actually going to go with the Chiefs over Baltimore. I'm just scared of them making a run in the playoffs here. And in the NFC, I'm actually going to go with Dallas over San Francisco as well. And then in the Super Bowl, I'm going to give it to Dallas over Kansas City. Don't hate me, you Giants fans, but had to do it.
You're going to hate yourself for that pick.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's a spicy bracket, but we'll see.
Spicy bracket. I don't think there's a lot of overlap in most of our brackets. So I shouldn't see Joey's. Joe, why don't you reveal yours so we can see if there's going to be a lot of overlap or not?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. In the AFC first round, I was the same as you, Ride Dog. I had Cleveland, KC, and Buffalo all advancing. And then Cleveland over Baltimore. Sorry, Schluter, but I think Baltimore is going to meet the same end that they met in Lamar's MVP season, where they had the bye, and then an insuperior AFC team with a decent defense is going to come into Baltimore and take them down, a la Ryan Tannehill. And Buffalo over Kansas City, and then Buffalo over Cleveland in the conference championship to make it to the Super Bowl. And then in the NFC, Philly over Tampa Bay, the Rams over the Lions, and the Cowboys over the Packers. The 49ers and the Cowboys advancing to the conference championship, and the 49ers beating Dallas in the NFC championship game, and then beating Buffalo in the Super Bowl. So San Francisco over Buffalo is my Super Bowl prediction. Sorry, Ryan.
All right. We got the same Super Bowl champion, Joe, but different paths to get there. So in the AFC, I got Cleveland over Texans. I think we all got that. I actually have Miami beating the Chiefs. I think that's going to happen. They are just – I think that there's a big chink in the armor of in Kansas City there. Although the weather would be bad, but I do think that the Dolphins can run the ball, and I think they'll be okay with it. And Buffalo beating Pitt. Then I got Baltimore beating Miami in that showdown, and Buffalo taking out Cleveland, the way those seedings work out. And then in the conference championship, I got Baltimore taking out Buffalo, which I think will be a great game, but I do think I don't fully trust Buffalo at this time going up against a defense like that, so I'm going with Baltimore. And then on the NFC side, I actually got Tampa Bay beating Philly because I think Philly has looked bad. I think their secondary is pretty rough, and I think Evans and Baker are going to light them up. Then you got Rams over Lions and Dallas over Green Bay. San Fran's going to take out the Rams. Dallas is going to take out Tampa Bay. So San Fran and Dallas meeting in the conference championship with San Fran taking out Dallas, and then San Fran moving on and taking out the Ravens in the Super Bowl. So your Super Bowl champs will be one of the most dominant teams all year, but it'll be a pretty good Super Bowl, I think. And that used to be, was that the old Harbaugh Brothers Bowl that we had there too? So a nice little rematch.
Sure was.
But yeah, I'm excited for the playoffs. Trying to make a lot of money on it. We'll see what happens, but we'll have some group bets, I'm sure. But thank you guys for listening. Hope you had a great regular season. Get ready for the off season. We'll definitely be putting out pods in the off season as well. Obviously, the frequency will be a little less frequent, but we'll make sure to get some content out so you guys know how to manage your team accurately. But any final words from my crew here?
Just thanks for listening, everyone. 20 episodes, and we look forward to doing this for you guys over the summer as well.
Yeah, let's keep it rolling. And if you have any ideas for segments or things you want to hear on the off season, just reach out. We can make it happen.
We are here to please. All right. Well, with that said, thank you guys again for listening. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the off season. Rest up.
Episode of the NSFW Dynasty podcast. Tune in next time.